Hello. Today we'll be providing an overview of BWGA Oversight Services Common Monitoring Findings. In this presentation, we will review the difference between a finding and a concern, common administrative findings, common fiscal integrity findings, common programmatic findings, and how to avoid findings. First, let's take a look at what a finding is and how it differs from a concern. All right, it's pop quiz time. The question is, what is a monitoring finding? Is it A, an incident of noncompliance with a federal, state, or local statute, regulation, policy, guidance, etc.? B, an opportunity to provide technical assistance to ensure local boards are falling on the correct side of the compliance line? C, an indictment of the local board and its provider's ability to properly perform basic compliance functions? D, A and B, or E, all of the above? Please place your guesses in the chat, and I'm going to give a couple of seconds to be able to have everyone answer. Time's up. Now that we've gotten some of your feedback, let's go to the next slide to reveal the answer. The answer is D, letters A and B. The takeaway from this quiz is to really destigmatize the concept of a monitoring finding. It's a quest I've been on for the past 11 plus years. Findings are not an indictment of a local area's ability to remain in compliance. Its purpose is to identify citable areas of noncompliance and provide an opportunity for technical assistance. I've said this many times that at its core, monitoring should be a learning experience. Sometimes we find ourselves on the non-compliant end of the compliance line. It happens with local areas, states, and even the federal government. So let's work together to get us back on track. Since implementing the resolution-based monitoring process, the number of findings identified by BWGA Oversight Services has been greatly reduced overall as local practices evolved with a focus on compliance. So, how do findings differ from concerns? As we learned in the last several slides, findings happen as a result of citable instances of noncompliance. Concerns, on the other hand, indicate the presence of an activity that doesn't rise to the level of being citably noncompliant. However, without a change in course, it's likely to result in noncompliance within the next year's monitoring. We also saw during the PY 2023 monitoring that some programmatic findings were considered by BWGA to be concerns if the noncompliance was determined to be an isolated incident. Moving on, let's discuss some common administrative findings. Before we do that, let's step back for just a second to discuss what it means for a finding to be considered common. Common findings are generally those seen in multiple local areas over the past several years. The list you'll see on the next several slides do not represent all the findings identified in these sections, but should give you a good idea. Now, let's get to some of the more common administrative findings. The first administrative section we'll cover are findings identified when monitoring policies and agreements. Here are a list of 6 items identified while performing this monitoring. Of these, the first bulleted item has more recently topped this list of common findings overall. Next are common administrative findings identified while monitoring for compliance with the PA Sunshine Act. Notice again, the top bullet states the requested documentation was not provided or not provided timely. This is a theme you'll see throughout these slides, and with good communication between the local board and oversight services is one of the easiest findings to remedy. I'll give you a few seconds to browse through the other bullets. Finally, of the administrative categories the BWGA Oversight Services team monitors are common monitoring findings identified during the review of the local board's monitoring of their subrecipients and the assessment of risk. On this slide are a few references local board staff can review to avoid some of the common administrative findings identified in the previous slides. Next, let's discuss common fiscal integrity findings. These are also going to be broken out in the general categories found on BWGA Oversight's monitoring tools. First, the procurement and subcontract review. As I mentioned during the last section, one of our most common findings is that the requested documentation was not provided or not provided timely. However, the rest of the items listed are also pretty commonly found. These include the local procurement process lacked detail or was not followed. The bid scoring was not adequately defined. The contract did not include the required elements or assurances. The project narrative or budget was not adequately defined. And finally, the Stevens Amendment was missing from the RFP. Next, in the fiscal integrity section, after the most common finding we've seen throughout, BWGA Oversight also very commonly sees late FSRs, expenditures reported on the incorrect FSR, inadequate supporting documentation and justification, improperly allocated staff time for the work performed, and staff whose total salary once all federal funds are combined exceed the executive level 2 salary cap. For audit results, BWGA's Fiscal Operations Unit has taken over much of the review of single audits. However, issues with audits still often appear on Oversight's monitoring reports. This mainly only occurs when audit submissions are not timely. Unlike the other sections of Oversight's monitoring, the corrective action process is fully deferred to the Fiscal Operations Unit. Most questions you might have on the common fiscal integrity findings can be answered by delving into either the Uniform Administrative Guidance or L&I's Financial Management Policy and its attached guide. But L&I's Oversight and Monitoring Policy does go over the items in this section that Oversight reviews. Finally, let's go over some of the common programmatic findings. Let's start off with service delivery monitoring and case file reviews. In the past several years, the frequency of service delivery and case file review findings make up the majority on any program year report. These findings can often be the easiest to resolve with the local board and BWPO providing training virtually and having technical assistance guides on CWDS help for the bullet points listed on this slide. However, we'd also like to acknowledge several local board staff have come to Oversight Services earnestly and said the training they provide works well so long as there isn't a lot of turnover of service provider staff, which some note is a sizable issue. Please remember to stay strong and continue ensuring the training is being provided at regular intervals, and monitoring for compliance is more regular if non-compliance in this area is prevalent. Finally, performance. This is a category where there aren't often monitoring findings, and to be frank, there aren't a plethora of monitoring findings for a local area to accrue if there was an issue. However, unlike other categories, performance findings have an outsized impact where failure to meet performance levels may affect a local board's ability to be certified or certified for the full 2 years. Here are a list of L&I policies that can be used to answer many of your technical assistance needs, starting with L&I's System of Record policy, then Common Identifier, WIOA Performance Assessment, Youth Eligibility, and Self-Attestation. This isn't an exhaustive list, but will be very useful to start you out. We'll be ending today's presentation with arguably the subject many of you were patiently waiting for, which is how to avoid findings. On the following slide are some basic considerations local areas can use to have the best chance of avoiding report findings. We're calling it Avoiding Findings 101. On this slide, you'll see 5 recommendations which will give the local area the greatest opportunity to avoid findings. They are: ensure regular review of the federal, state, and local statutes, regulations, policies, and guidance which govern WIOA activities. This is recommended to be an annual process. Next, phone a friend. Ask colleagues from other local boards how they've addressed a similar situation or compliance issue. Some of the best solutions are locally generated. Next, base local board compliance tools on BWGA's monitoring tools. We've given you what we're looking for. Develop these for local use to ensure the compliance basics are covered. Also, monitor early and often. Attend Touchpoint sessions like the one you're viewing right now. And finally, contact your assigned oversight analyst or the Oversight Services resource account listed here, and we'll pull the resources needed to respond to technical assistance requests. This presentation, including all the resources, will be added to the BWGA Media Library on the L&I website for your future reference. If you're attending the live session, please feel free to put any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll respond to as many as possible. If you're viewing this presentation after the session and have any questions, please direct them to the BWGA Oversight Services resource account above, or contact the assigned analyst for the local area. Thank you again for your time and attention.